What's up, guys? Welcome to another episode of Scale Your Real Estate Podcast. I'm here with Dustin Baldwin today. And man, I got to tell you, we go deep into how to build to rent. Now, selfishly, I asked a lot of these questions for me because I'm looking to build co-living buildings from the ground up. So we got technical, I'm not going to lie. But if you think, if this is something you're interested in, building something from the ground up, then you're going to love this episode because we really get into the nitty gritty. Dustin's an awesome guy, great integrity, great character, and he brings us a ton of value on the mindset and the details of building something from the ground up between architects and contractors and financing and hiring a developer and all this great stuff. So enjoy this episode. Much love. So we've been talking for a while already, Dustin, but I am so excited to have Dustin on the show. I got my dear friend Dustin Baldwin on. Dustin is a 17-year Marine Corps veteran. Thank you for your service, sir. He's an MBA. He's been a real estate investor for the last, don't quote me in the actual number of years, but I think for the last 10 years, according to your bio. Yeah. And he's a fellow co-living investor, which is why part of the reason he's on the show. So we're going to get to pick his brain about that. And what I am so excited, and I'm sure we'll put in some of those clips that we just talked about, but what Dustin specializes in and his superpower, if you will, one of his many superpowers, is that he specializes in new home construction and build to rent. And this is a subject I know I've talked about on the show before, and I'm just so interested in because for co-living, I just think that's going to be like one of the waves of the future of how we're going to really scale co-living is by building these things from the ground up. So, and Dustin is a brand new father, 3 weeks old. So, dude, welcome and congrats.
Well, thank you for that absolutely astonishing intro. I feel like that was really propping me up, so appreciate it. And thanks for the opportunity to be on here because I'm super excited to talk to your audience and you about how build to rent could work in co-living. And it's just a really cool model that works very well.
Cool, man. Yeah, excited to get into it. So let's just start with, maybe just tell us a little bit about yourself. And then if you want to segue into like how you got into real estate investing, that would be awesome.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm going to water this down a lot because I have quite an interesting past, a lot of diversity there. So in the essence of our time and your audience's time, let's just say joined the Marine Corps out of high school, joined the reserves, deployed pretty quickly after, and in between deployments to Iraq and Afghanistan, I went to college at University of Florida. I financed I got my bachelor's degree in finance and real estate because I thought corporate was the way to go. So after UF, I got a job at Lockheed Martin up in North Virginia. And after about 6 months of that, I realized that corporate lifestyle was absolutely not for me. And I had an opportunity to move down to St. Petersburg, Florida to become a financial advisor with Edward Jones. So then I moved, uprooted my life, came here, had my own office, was a financial advisor. And with that income, I was able to use my VA loan and I bought my very first rental property. It was a house I could live in. So house hacking. I lived in the master and I rented the other 2 rooms out and I lived for free. I actually made $300 a month on my mortgage. So I was like, this is awesome. Why didn't everybody tell me about this? This was before I knew about Bigger Pockets or any of that. So, and I was hooked from that point. And such a crazy story. I rented one of the rooms out to a buddy of mine I served in the Marine Corps with. And he came up to me one day and he's like, hey man, I want to talk to you about coming on board with this company that we started. And I was like, what is it? And he's like, prisoner transport. I was like, what? Prisoner transport? And at first I was just like, okay, you're crazy, dude. I'm not transporting inmates. So long story short, I eventually decided to leave Edward Jones, move to Orlando. We started up this company. It was already kind of started up, but they were very, very small. And we ended up growing that thing over the next 4 years and sold it. And we merged with a larger company, sold it in the ESOP. And along that path, I picked up another co-living property in Orlando. And when I moved to Orlando, let me back up, I rented out the rental or the master. So now I have master, 2 bedrooms rented. Now I'm making $1,000 a month on that property. And I'm renting it out long-term leases. So that's a little bit different than some of the other things out there. But I'll lock somebody up for 12-month minimum, $950 for the master, $750 for the bedrooms. And then I just set it and forget it unless they need something. And I invoice them for all the utilities. So then I go to Orlando and I buy this property, and I'm like, all right, 3 bedrooms is okay, but I want a 4-bedroom now. So I get a 4-bedroom house, and now I'm making $1,600 a month in cash flow. And I'm like, okay, this is awesome. So then as I'm going through this prisoner transport thing, I have more cash, distributions. I buy another one in Brandon, Florida, which is just outside of Tampa Bay. And I realized very quickly that model was extremely hard to scale, because I did not know that there were property managers out there, such as yourself, that would actually do this for me. And I was already up to, what is that? That many doors.
12 tenants in 3 houses, right?
Right. And when you're dealing with young professionals and they're like complaining over using each other's salt and pepper shakers, or that homeboy like won't clean out the fridge or whatever, you're just like, dude, I don't want to be doing this. So I stayed with that amount of properties. I did not want to go anymore. And fast forward, after selling the prisoner transport company, I took that capital and I ended up buying a lot here in St. Petersburg, Florida. And I was like, I'm going to buy this piece of land and I'm going to develop on it. I'm going to find a builder. I'm going to work with them, and I'm going to build my primary residence, because stuff is way too expensive to buy. And if I can build for this and have equity at the end, why not? So that's how I got into it. I found a builder that did build on your lot. I worked directly with them, learned a lot in that first house. But at the end of it, I was able to basically got a construction to perm loan, and I was able to transition that interest only payment into a permanent 30-year loan. And we had probably $300,000 in equity in the home, and we were just living on a really low mortgage, which was nice. And then I was like, why not do this for rental properties? So then I went a couple blocks up and I found this house. It was definitely a neighborhood that was in transition. This house was really run down, and there was just no rehabbing it. Disclaimer, I am not a rehabber. I have no interest in rehabbing. I'm not good at it. And to be honest, I like the idea of building something from the ground up and knowing all the aspects of that house than buying a house that somebody else built and not knowing what's behind the walls. So that's just my personal preference. So we knocked this house down and ended up building another house, and I just started Airbnb-ing it.
And to the foundation, you took it down completely.
Yeah, straight, scraped the lot is what you call it.
Yeah.
And built a house, took about 9 months, and then we furnished it and we did Airbnb with that one. And then in the meantime, the house we're living in is the same floor plan. I'm just like, well, look how good we're doing with this Airbnb. Why not move out of this one, go buy another house for ourselves and Airbnb this one? So we did the Airbnb thing on both of those houses. And then I started thinking, well, Airbnb, I saw it before it started happening. It's like starting to slow down because COVID's not a thing really anymore. So people are starting to go international, and it slows down Airbnb. So now I'm like, okay, let's build some stuff that makes sense as room rentals or long-term luxury rentals. So that's what I'm focusing on now. So my projects that moving forward, I bought a lot. I split it in half. I put 2 fee simple townhouses. It's essentially a duplex, but I could sell them off individually if I wanted to. And I put one on the market and one for rent. And I put it up for rent for like $43.50 a month, thinking that I might get somebody. I had like 10 applicants in a day. So I said, wow, okay, why am I going to sell the other one when there's a bunch of other townhouses going up right now by other builders, and they're keeping the cost per square foot low? I'm just going to rent both of these out, and then I'll cash out refi, get all my money out of the project back out, and basically have a free house with cash flowing money. And I'll just keep repeating that. So basically like a buy, build, rent, refinance, repeat. So a BBRRR.
That's awesome.
So that's where I am today.
BBRRR. First of all, such a fascinating journey. And it's so cool because you've had so much success. I mean, you didn't go into the prisoner transport thing, but you massively made that successful, right? So I think it's just cool that we're getting you on here because you bring so much experience from the building side of things and so much experience from the business side of things. And I know being your friend, I get to pick your brain about both of those. So that's super awesome. But something that just came up for me as you were talking was like, it's so interesting how when I talk to people about how they started in real estate, there's always like some mixture of retaining their capital, whether that's through like primary residence loans, like you were saying, like you moved in, right? And so you probably got, I'm assuming your first co-living house, you got 5% down or 3% down or something. Or no, you used a VA loan, so it's 0% down.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I actually got paid to buy that house.
Yeah,
The
nice.
seller gave me a $300 gift card to Home Depot and covered all my closing costs.
Nice. I think that's a really great thing for people to wrap their heads around. And now you're doing that same thing with build to rent. You're basically building homes, getting all your money back out so you can repeat this thing as many times as possible. And that's hard to do, I know, and we'll go into some of the details of it, but it's possible. And I think people really have to wrap their heads around, okay, you have to be a little flexible. You might have to be willing to move. Is there any secrets that you can share with us specifically around VA loans? Because I definitely have some in my audience that are interested in that and that, have been in the military or are veterans. Like, is there anything you share with us about, is there anything that you have to know to use those for rental properties, or you have to live in them, I think, for a little period of time, right?
Yes. Your intention at the time of loan application, it needs to be that you're going to live in the property. If extenuating circumstances happen after you buy the property and you need to move somewhere else, then you can. But if you're doing that intentionally, that I would not do that. That's considered the F word. We want to stay away from that. So for the VA loan, it does have to be your primary residence, but there's nothing against house hacking. So if you wanted to go buy a triplex and you want to live in one of the units and rent the other two out, you can do that and live there for a few months and then decide that you're tired of listening to the tenants next door. So you want to move out, go buy another house. There's a thing called second tier VA. A lot of veterans don't know about it, but it's called second tier entitlement. So if you don't use all of your entitlement on your first VA loan, you don't have to refinance your first VA loan. You still can use some of your entitlement to buy a second house, as long as it's your primary.
What is entitlement exactly?
It's basically how much money they give you towards how much they're guaranteeing on a loan for you. So it's your entitlement. So I don't quote me on the numbers because it's been many years since I've gotten a VA loan, but just work with your lender to basically say like, hey, you're going to pull your certificate of eligibility through the VA. They're going to look at it and say, oh, okay, you have this much that you can use. Let's say it's 100,000 down or guaranteed. So they're going to work out a number of how much money you'll have to come down with the difference. But either way, it's still way better than a conventional loan because you're going to save a lot on fees. So,
got it. Okay, no, that's cool. Thanks for sharing that. So let's move into this build to rent stuff, because I think this is going to be incredibly valuable. So I just want to share a little bit before you kind of walk us through the steps on how, high level someone would go about starting this process. I think my share, and I've shared this on this show before, is that I'm interested in build to rent because I want to build homes with the right number of bedrooms and the right number of bathrooms for co-living. I'm like you, Dustin. I hate rehabs. I don't feel like I'm a good rehabber. And granted, I'm not a good build from the ground up yet guy either. So I think, I'm picking your brain on that. But like, I just believe that's a wave of the future. I know some people who are building, 7-bedroom, 7-bath homes, right? Which is just like gold. Some people are building duplexes with 7 bedrooms, 7 baths on the bottom and 7 bedrooms, 7 baths on the top. And I actually had the CEO of Pad Split give me his plans for that duplex 7777. So it's a 1414 now. You might need to build that on a multifamily plot of land or whatever, but I just see this being so cool, so valuable for the co-living industry. So high level, talk to us about the steps to like start this for someone who's new.
Absolutely. Build to rents for co-living.
Yeah, maybe build to rent in general, but then in the back of my mind, I'm just specifically thinking about it for co-living. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. So the first thing that I would do is I would look at what is the price per square foot that homes in my market are selling for, or my market or my target market. So let's say here in St. Pete, decent homes are selling for anywhere between 300 and 400 a square foot. So then I'm going to say, all right, how many square feet do I want to build? And what is that going to cost me? So I know that I've created great relationships with builders that I've gotten a price per square foot anywhere between 140 and 160 a square. And that's gross square footage. So this is where a lot of people mess up. Gross square footage means that it includes the garage too. So co-living and rental properties don't typically have garages, so you don't really need to worry about it. But if you're going to build a primary residence, you got to count your garage. So towards that, not just the under airspace. So let's say, just to keep math simple, that you're going to build a 2,000 square foot gross square foot home. It's going to cost me 150 a square foot. So that's going to cost $300,000 in build costs. And let's say that the market, be conservative, is buying that 2,000 square foot house for 300 a square foot. So you have $600,000 now that you know that this thing will likely appraise for, give or take $20,000 to $50,000 in either direction. All right. So now your variable is your land cost. That's your variable. That's your like, okay, this is the thing that makes or breaks my deal because I know what houses are selling for. And I know from the builder what I can reasonably, conservatively build for. So let's go find the land. So you have to ask yourself, how much equity do you want in the property after you're done with it? And what is the end use? Is your end to sell it? Probably not, because you're trying to build cash flow, which is why the build to rent is such a great model. So let's say that we found land at $100,000. I found a parcel I can build on it. It's $100,000. So, all right, I got $300,000 build costs. I got $100,000 in land. I'm going to give myself a buffer. Let's call it 20%, a little less than that, $50,000. My all-in costs on this project, conservatively, with a stress test included, $450,000. So I know that this thing's going to appraise for $600,000. So immediately I know at a minimum I'm going to make between $150,000 and $200,000 I'm going to have in a buffer and positive equity when I'm done with this project. So then I get to the end, I get my certificate of occupancy. And I know we're just talking numbers right now. We can back up and talk about the process of like how exactly and who the people need to be in place. But as far as numbers are concerned, you know that you have a $200,000 like buffer there, and you're like, all right, is this worth $200K? I'm added to my net worth, probably, because if you hire the right people, you're relatively like hands off. Excuse me. So then what you need to do is solve for your opportunity cost as well, because when you're doing a build to rent, it's going to take you between 12 to, depending on your builder and a permitting, 12 to 18 months. So if you were to go out and buy a house, a rental property that's already there, that only takes 2 months to rehab it, and you can rent it in 2 months, subtract your cash flow that you would have made from that rental property from what you're going to make from your new construction to make sure that your opportunity cost is not like, you're not working backwards. Because if it's going to take you 18 months to build this house and you're not going to get rents for 18 more months, you could be getting rents over here on an existing house. The reason why I skew those numbers a little bit, and I don't necessarily, what I also add to my opportunity cost is the savings I'm going to get from new construction. New construction is typically worth, market dependent, 10 to 20% more on resale value. You're also going to have way lower insurance costs as well. You'll have cost segregation that you can take. You could take that with a regular rental property too, but in my experience, the new construction is a little bit better. And it's just, you have a lot less maintenance as well, and a lot less problems with your tenants telling you that you need to fix things. So I add all of that in there, and it's also going to be block construction. So I know that it's a rock solid investment.
Solid.
Yeah. So
let me see if I got this straight. So basically, process at a high level view. I'm going to build. I need to go see around this area of where I'm building. I need to see what things are selling for on a per square foot basis.
Yep.
So, and preferably other new construction. Like, don't just go look for crappy houses around that. Like, if I can find a new construction within a quarter mile of my little spot, like that's going to be better, right?
Absolutely. That'll be apples to apples. Yep.
Yeah. So apples to apples. I find a new construction. They're selling for $300 per square foot. I can reasonably say once my thing is built, it'll appraise for $300 per square foot. I then figure out what it costs to build, and then I add my land to my build costs, and then I subtract what you're saying opportunity costs, which would be like, hey, if I didn't build this, I could just have another rental just pumping out some cash flow for 12 months, whereas I'm going to be tied up for 12 months with this, and then use that little formula to figure out if it's worth it.
That's a very like high level back of the napkin formula.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. So let's just say, because this is actually kind of a real example for me. So let's just say I figure stuff in my area is going for $300 per square foot. Actually, let me even see what this one is going for. So I've got this house I'm buying. It's $400,000 and it's 2,400 square feet. So I don't even know what that is. $400,000 divided by 2,400. So 166 per square foot. That's cheap, but it's an old house. So that's maybe not the best example. Let's just say I find something that's selling for, so it's selling for 166 per square foot. I can build for basically 125. My land cost is going to be zero because I get a free lot with this land that I'm building. And so how do you know if there's enough there? I guess how do you know if that spread is enough for you? Is it just a random like, oh, it's 100,000, there's a spread, that's enough? Like, what's enough?
That's investor specific. For me, I don't usually do a deal unless there's 300,000 or more in it. I've kind of graduated to the next level, but I would say like 100K, if you can build a house in 12 months and end up positive 100K in your net worth, that's a really good deal. Especially if you're just getting started, and then you can get pickier and pickier as you go. But if it's going to cash flow and you have positive net worth at the end of it that you can leverage to then go and invest further, like why not? So what I would do, like 166 minus 125 times your square foot, that's your buffer. And then just make sure, I don't know if the builder you're working with is also covering site development costs and all of that, utilities to the sites, new water meters, new sewer lateral lines, all these things that the traditional investor, when you go and buy a house, you don't have to worry about, but new construction you do. Then I would just make sure to price that in. But if you're getting a free lot and you're building on a lot that you already own, that's relatively low risk, in my opinion, if the numbers make sense.
I was going to ask a question specifically about the co-living thing. Like, so does it never enter your calculations, like for you to pull all your cash out? Like, oh, if it's going to appraise for 120% of what I have in it, therefore I could pull out all my cash because I could get an 80% loan on it, long-term loan. Does that thought ever cross your mind, or do you ever take that into calculation at all? Like, oh, well, I basically would own it free and clear kind of thing.
Yep. So that's my business plan. So I pull all of my costs out, and then I also pull out like an additional amount to kind of pay myself. And I could pull out the entire value up to 75% or 80% LTV, but that was a different, it's a different time with interest rates. So you kind of have to look at like, is it really worth pulling out that much money at 6.75%, or some of these loans are 8% now, or should I just pull out my project costs and leave some equity in the house until interest rates start to normalize? Because I believe they will. So it's just kind of looking at the different situation and also your cash flow, right? So going back to that example you just gave me, I said $100,000 buffer. What I would actually say is like, if it's also dependent on how long you intend to hold this asset. Because if it's a build to rent and you end up building a brand new construction home for the same amount that you can buy something that's older, even if you're net zero and your cash flows are the same, you still are better off because you now have a brand new house. So yeah, the $100,000 buffer for me is more so because that's just me. I like to have, I'm just building my portfolio, and I just like to have that equity. It's just me. But that's, if I were truly like looking at this where I'm going to hold these assets for 10 to 20 years, 10 to 20 years from now, there's going to be so much equity in these properties. It's going to be unreal. So it really doesn't necessarily matter, but it will matter from a loan perspective, because if you have to cash out that money and they're telling you that you can only take 75%, you do need to have that buffer. Hopefully that makes sense.
Right. Yeah, I think it does make sense. So before we get into some of the details of like finding a lot, contractor, what you look for in those things, like starting from the ground up on the steps, what I kind of hear you saying is like, hey, Sam, $166 per square foot is what something is selling for right next to that. If it cost you $166 all in to build it, but your cash flow was insane, like it would be worth it, is kind of what you're saying, right?
Yep, absolutely.
Hey, and for me, and I think for a lot of co-living investors, that's kind of the play, right? It's like, hey, if I can build this and it cash flows amazingly, but it's exactly how I need it. I don't have to put any more cash in it from a rehab perspective. It's brand new. It's already got 7 bathrooms. I don't have to go into a house and then take out of my cash and add 3 more bathrooms. That is worth it sometimes. And so what I would almost do is like get it to that point and then run an evaluation as if, would I buy that house once it's built? And what's the cash on cash return going to be once I can refinance it.
Yep, absolutely.
So what are the steps like for someone who's beginning? They're like, okay, they get it, they're sold, they want to build let's say a co-living building from the ground up. Let's say they just want to build a house and then rent it out. But the whole their strategy is they're sold on your strategy of I want to build to rent. So where do they start and what's like the first step? I'm assuming the first step is like plans. Is the first step plans or is the first step finding a lot? Like that's actually a basic question that I have. Like what is the first step?
Yeah, the first step is probably getting the land under contract, finding the land, getting under contract for due diligence. Then from there, you're going to want to get a city. We call it here a buildable lot letter. It tells you what is allowed on that lot. You're also, at this point, you already know the zoning of your local city. So you know what zoning meets what and how many units that you can build on here and what you can build. So knowing what you can build.
If you don't know that, how would you find that out?
What I would recommend to somebody that doesn't want to get in the weeds on this stuff is they need to hire a developer that is also an investor that's done this before, that really knows that market, or work within a developer that can go find a builder to be your intermediary between the builder and you, that can consult with you to make sure that you are not going to get blindsided by some wrong zoning or some cost that the builder didn't tell you about. So the who, not how approach, find a great developer that does build to rent, that also offers consulting services or that can help you through this, is what I would say. Otherwise, spend a lot of time on Google, go to your city website, walk into your city municipality building, talk to zoning, ask them, how do you know where zoning is? They usually have a published zoning map, and then it's called a Muni code. It's a pretty standard website that most municipalities use, and it has all their codes in there. And you can say for here, like an example, CRT1 zoning, it goes through all of the specifications of CRT1 zoning, what I can build, the setbacks, the requirements for the front, the requirements for parking spaces. There's so much to think about when you're building, which is why I say if you're a beginner, who, not how, hire a developer.
As a beginner, how would I even begin to find a developer? I mean, I love that concept, but like, where would I go? Do I just search on Zillow for people who build houses? Like, how do I do this?
So you have two options. So funny you should ask that. So I actually just started a company called Velocity Development Group, and I'm offering consulting services for a small amount of investors that I will walk them through this process and help them find builders that are going to build for a relatively good price. Otherwise, you can go online, just Google build to rent developments. Not all communities are going to have it because most of the builders I find, they're all spec builders. They like to build and sell. Build and sell, build and sell. They're just a rotating wheel. They're just this massive machine that just does it at scale. There's not a lot of people that are doing the build to rent other than just like the BlackRocks. And you're not going to call up BlackRock and be like, hey, can you show me how to build to rent? They're going to say, right. No, dude. So just do a simple Google search, contact me. I can help you. Even find somebody else in your local market if I can't help you. But yeah, I would be happy to chat with you, Sam, on this stuff because I love the idea of building co-living. It's like what got me started in real estate and what I'm pursuing now coming together, and it just really excites me too. So,
all right, so perfect world, they find a developer. I go out and find it, and it's funny because as you were saying that, so I'm in the process of doing this in a town called Black Mountain. I found this lot and going, I had my realtor go talk to the city, and it's a lot of little things, and I'm like, keep asking them like, what's the next step? What's the next step? And kind of different people have different ideas of what the next step is. But as soon as you were saying this, I thought of a guy. His name is Mike, and he's in the Asheville, North Carolina area, and he is a developer. And I was like, why haven't I called him? Right, but just to even get his advice on this thought. So that's a really cool piece of advice. I love that. Let's say someone's like, nah, I'm going to bootstrap this. I want to do this from the beginning. So you said first step is to get the lot under contract. And usually when you get land, you kind of get it's not like putting a house under contract, right? Usually don't you get a longer due diligence period? Could you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah. So residential land, it's not that long. It's usually 30 days, 45 days max. You could put it in the contract and make it contingent upon XYZ zoning or contingent upon being able to build 2 to 3 units here. So if you find out you can't build that, you're out. You can just get out of the contract, no problem, get your earnest money back. You can bootstrap this. Just be expected for it to take twice as long because you're going to give yourself an education as well. It's what I did. So what I would say where that would not work and you would really end up hurting yourself is if you're financing this thing, because if you're financing this thing and it takes you 2 years because you're learning along the way of all the things that you have to do in order to get this thing ground up and get a certificate of occupancy, the keys to your house, it's going to take you a long time. And I just went through this with my townhouse project. I decided that I'm tired of hiring a builder to come in and just do a turnkey. I want to learn it. I want to do it. So I funded the entire project myself because I wasn't paying that interest for the 18, 24 months that it was going to take. It did take longer. I am now, though, all in cost, $850. That includes the land, that includes all the construction, site prep, everything. And now each side is going to appraise conservatively at $825 per side. So I've essentially
what's your all-in cost again?
$850.
And you basically created $800,000 in equity.
Yep. Exactly.
So guys, I hope everybody listening to that's the cool thing about this, right? If you so humor me for a moment. Let me ask some like pointed questions about the bootstrap piece. So I get this piece of land under contract. I got 30 days. What do I need to do in those 30 days?
Okay, so you're under contract 30 days. You need to find out what it's zoned for, what your actual costs are going to be from your contractor or developer. Try to get them to agree to a guaranteed maximum price. It's called a GMP. So that basically says, all right, all in, your project is going to cost X amount. And if I go over this, acts of God excluded, COVID happened, that's not going to count. Then you're going to cover anything over and above that if there's a mistake. Most builders, well, depends on the builder. More niche builders will agree to this. You might pay a little bit more per square foot because you're kind of like ensuring yourself that this is going to be your max price. But it's having the peace of mind is good. I also build into the contract an incentive fee, which helps the builder. It motivates them to get it done faster and under budget. So if I say I'm going to give you a budget of $450,000 to build this triplex, and you come in on the project cost at $400,000, then you're going to make 50% of the difference. So they'll make $25,000. Let me back up a minute. There's many ways, but there's two main ways to price construction. There's either cost plus or there's guaranteed price per square foot, like a project cost. So the latest one with the guaranteed maximum price and the incentive fee is a cost plus 20% that I agreed on. They're passing every invoice across my desk for every single subcontractor at every cost so that I can see it. The reason why I wanted to do that is because I'm going to learn every piece of receipt that goes into this house so that I can know exactly what it is. And secondly, I'm going to give them an incentive fee. So if they complete this project at $400,000, they're going to make, instead of cost plus 20%, they're going to make 50% on it. So they're going to make an additional 30% on the cost that they save me. And that works out because if they come in at 400, I'm now in it for 425. So I'm $25,000 better off.
But if it's a guaranteed maximum price, there's no such thing as an incentive fee because it's like they're trying to save themselves money. They've just given you a flat rate, right? Am I right about that?
No, there is. So there's both, because the guaranteed maximum price is your upper threshold. That's just saying they're not going to go above that.
Got it.
On this particular one for my triplex, that's actually a quadplex that I got a little creative with one of the units that has a door that splits, that can open, that can swap between a 2-2 and a 1-1 and a 1-1.
Sounds like a little house hack. I like it.
Yeah, a little creativity. We're working on a $475,000 GMP, but she says that she thinks she could get it done for $425,000. So I gave her an incentive fee at $450,000. So anything under $450,000, she gets extra money on. Does that make sense?
Okay, so you can still do it. Yeah, so you can still do it even with a GMP. They're just saying that's the upper limit. Yep. So I've got this lot under contract. You're saying, okay, I'm starting to talk to contractors, but I have no plans. Talk to me. I mean, I know this is basic for you because you've been doing this, but like, I have an idea. I want to build this 8-bedroom, 8-bath house or the 7-bedroom, 7-bath house. I've heard of these co-living. Now, I personally do have plans that some people have given me that they just were like, here's what I built. So that's cool. I have something to go off of. But let's say someone listening to this has no plans. Where do they start with that process? And they have this piece of land under contract. So I've got 30 days now, right? Like time's ticking. What do I do?
Yep. So there's two different types of builders out there. There is a build on your lot. So if you Google build on your lot builder, you can essentially pass all of this on to them. They will create your plans. It's like going to a Target and saying, oh, I want this off the shelf. They have all these different floor plans that you can choose from. It's already done. They already have plans. They already have everything. They usually they usually price in your site prep. They usually price in your impact fees, your permitting fees, all these other fees that you get just hit with if you're developing it yourself. And so there's that option. Option 2 is when you're working with a developer, they're going to say, all right, what is it that you want? If you want a custom home, like in your case, you're not going to find a builder that's going to build in your lot with a prefabricated 7-bedroom house. Not going to happen.
No. Yeah.
So if you want a custom build, so you're going to come to the developer, or you're going to go find an architect yourself if you want to bootstrap it. But the developer will be able to help you find an architect and then be on calls with you to turn your idea and put it on paper. And then you're working over the next 4 to 5 weeks, really getting these plans like done. And you've already closed on your lot by this point, by the way.
Got it. Okay. So you're
already on the lot. Yes. You don't want to start paying an architect until you've closed on your lot.
Interesting. Okay. But during those 30 days, you can build approximately what you want, the size you want. So you've gone through city and zoning and all of that, but you don't have the plans yet. But how is the city going to tell you can build it if you don't have plans yet? Are you just going to tell them approximately or kind of know, or?
So that's a great question. So that's knowing your market and knowing your city. So if the zoning says you can build up to 4 units, then you can build 4 units. If you turn around and say that I'm going to build 4 units and each of them are going to be 4 bedrooms, 4 baths, and I'm going to have this X amount of parking spaces, you're not going to know that at that point. They're probably going to shoot you down because in this particular city, they're not on board with the future of co-living yet. They're getting there yet. So you have to get a little creative on how you do your plans. But the steps, high level, is your due diligence. Like you can build X amount of units. If it's a single family house, you can build a single family house on it. Your developer can tell you, like, these are how many parking spaces you need. This is how much of a footprint on the lot. It's called a FAR, floor area ratio. How much footprint of the actual lot you can have, how much green space you need. And then from there, you can even go to your architect or your developer and say, all right, listen, I just need to verify that we can fit this on here. And they can do a real quick draft up. And if you want to go a step further, you can actually schedule a call with the city. It's called a planning meeting. And you just give them a site plan and a basic overview of what you're trying to build. And you have a meeting with them. And everybody from the city's on. You have fire marshal, you have zoning, you have planning, you have all these people. And they'll all give you comments back. It's about a 30-minute meeting. So you could do that. And then from there, you're like, okay, this is going to work or it's not. There is some risk because you're still like needing to find out, have the finished plans. And a builder is not going to be able to give you a GMP or a price until you have turnkey plans. Your finishes, how many parking spaces, what is block cost at the time, what is wood cost at the time. So there is a little bit of risk there, which is why you price in that buffer. So
how do I go about financing? Like, what are the steps that you've used to finance a new build? I'd love to touch on that for a minute because I think that's a big question in a lot of people's minds. Like, how do these loans work? Who do I talk to? How do I pitch it?
Yep, great question.
And maybe take me as an example. Like like real life example. I have a lot. It's not under contract yet. It's in Asheville, North Carolina, but like I wanna build these co-living buildings on. It's a multifamily lot, and like I haven't even started the financing process, but I do not want to pay for the whole thing cash. Like I just don't want to, right? So like where do we go from here?
So the best way to do it, if you have the ability to buy the land cash, that is always the best because it's going to take a long time to get through permitting. If you do not have the cash to do that, there are banks out there that will give you land loans, and then you can layer on your construction loan. Some banks will give you both. You just need to make sure you price in that time for your interest and make sure it still makes sense because you're going to be paying interest-only payments on that for the next 12 to 18 months. But if you can own the lot cash, and then you can get through all the permitting part, and then you can go out and get a construction loan from a lender. They'll have it's interest only payments. It's right now you're probably looking at 8%, maybe 9%. It depends on your experience too. If you're doing it yourself, you're going to pay a lot more in interest. If you are hiring a developer that's used that bank in the past, you're going to get probably 6%, 7% maybe.
Yeah. So it really depends on who's in your corner.
Yep. But here's the cool thing. it might be 10%, call it 10% interest. You're not really paying 10%. If it costs you $450,000 for the build, you're not paying 10% on $450,000. You're paying 10% on the draw schedule, which is a waterfall of that money. So the builder might say, all right, I need $100,000 to start. So you're paying 10% on $100,000 for the first 3 months. And then they'll pull another draw once they get to that part of the project. So it actually works out to much less than 10% of the actual total project cost, because it's waterfalled.
And if I'm going to the lender, let's say I do have a developer on my side, and we go to this bank that he's got, and we're partners, we're building this. Are they going to underwrite that based on my personal income? Is that how that's going to be underwritten? I'm personally guaranteeing this note from this lender, and then, are there any lenders that do it based on what that home will rent for when it's done?
Yeah, there are construction lenders out there. I've not personally used any yet, but they will lend on a construction loan. They work with the builder directly to get the actual draw schedule, and they're going to ask them for like specific costs, like down to how much are your fixtures going to be, how much are your toilet's going to be. Like, they want to know everything. And then they're going to probably have a contingency in there that you're going to need to have in the bank. So that's like more of a commercial loan. So yeah, it is possible. And I'm cash out refining this townhouse project I just talked about, but I'm going down with a commercial bank down in Miami that is going to look at it, and they want to lend to me in an LLC. They don't want me to look at they want to see leases on the property and see what it's going to rent for, but they don't, as long as it makes sense from a rentability, and I think they count like 75% of the rents, but if it's not been 12 months of history, if it's future, then they'll count 75% of the rents towards your debt to income.
Nice.
So, yeah.
But otherwise, you are signing personally for these loans, at least for the construction period part, I'm assuming.
Right now I am, but I'm also looking to scale my business, and I will be scaling in the next 12 months. So right now I'm out there making relationships with banks that are going to be able to. So what I'm going to do with that money after I get it out of that townhouse project is I will take it, and then I will go and procure land, and I'll own that land, or I will raise money from investors to go own that land so that I'm not paying the interest on it. I'm paying them interest in the future when I cash them out as limited partners. But the last thing that I personally want to do is go get a land loan and pay 7% on land that's just sitting there doing nothing. Another strategy is to buy a house that is a rentable house. It's a one single family home that rents. Then you can get a loan on it. Then you can work on the plans for a fourplex. In the meantime, once you have the plans in hand, you can then go get said tenant out, demo the house, start your construction, and work with the lender to pay off the previous lender. And then there's a lot of different ways to be creative about this.
So let's talk about this one more thing. So I have a house, and I have a plot of land behind it that's a 1/4 acre, but right now it's all in one parcel. And I want to separate that out. I haven't bought the house yet. I have the house under contract, and I want to keep the house. I don't want to demo it. Like, it's going to be a great 8-bedroom co-living house. But where do I go? How do I go about separating that out? Should I do that before I buy it? Like, would that be best?
Does it still make sense if you can't separate that parcel out?
Yeah, it's still amazing as a deal. I just actually randomly found out it had an extra parcel and was like, I want to separate that out and try to see if there's a way that I can own that free and clear. Like you're saying, if I own the lot free and clear, that's the best way, because I can bring that to the bank, right? Is what you're saying. And then maybe get a construction loan for almost all the construction costs if I own the land. That's kind of what you were saying, right?
Yeah. Yep. It's just the land cost has to make up the LTV, right? So or you're going to need to come to the table with some money. So what I would say, if the deal makes sense without splitting the land off, I would just close on it anyways. And then what you could do, it's almost like a bonus. You end up with a free parcel. So go to the city. If you want to do it before you close, go to the city and say, what's the requirements to split this parcel? The lot split. I want to split this parcel out. What do I need to do? Usually that's zoning or planning and zoning. So contact planning and zoning from your city and say, what is it that I need to do to split this out? They're either going to say, you can, this is what you need to do, or you can't. For an example of what I had to do to split my lot here in St. Pete was I had to get a resurvey of the property. And then I had to have that surveyor come in and do it's called a lot sketch and description. They had to sketch out what the new lot would be. And they had to describe it in new parcels. Like if you go to the property appraiser website, all that long language, like quarter block on the northeast corner of blah, 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 that, they do that for you. And then you take that and your application to the lot split, you submit it to the city, and then they look at it, they have a hearing on it, they make sure that nobody's opposed to it, and then they say, okay, you're good, then you split it. From there, you got to go to the property appraiser website to make sure that they know that there's a new address, they assign an address. So
a surveyor is ultimately who has to end up coming out to split this thing out, right?
A surveyor will come out and do a sketch and description. It'll depend on your market. Every city's different. But like for an example, when I'm working with somebody that's an investor that wants to do this stuff, I'll go and contact the city. I'll find out what needs to be done. I'll talk to them, and then we'll go through that, let them know is it worth it or it's not, and then we'll get it done for them. So we're getting into the real technical stuff here. I love it.
Yeah, I mean, it's good. It's good though, because so here's what I'm going to try to do with this lot. I'm asking the seller. So I have this house under contract. It's got this 1/4 acre lot that I want to split off. So what I'm going to ask the seller to do, I'm going to ask him today, because I just found out. So I told my realtor, I said, go to the city. So he went to city zoning. I think zoning was who he went to, or maybe it was planning. And he said, can this be an extra lot? And in this area of town, it has to be exactly 1/4 acre to be a lot. And it is exactly 1/4 acre. So they're like, yeah. So what I'm going to try to do is I'm going to go to this, and you can tell me if this is the wrong approach, the right approach. But what happens is I don't want to put a lien against the whole. Once I get a loan on the whole thing, I'm a little worried that my lender is not going to release the lien for that extra parcel in the back.
Yeah.
So
valid concern.
That's a valid concern. Okay.
Yeah.
So what I'm going to go do is I'm asking the seller today if he will delay closing by another 45 days. I'll pay for the survey to get it separated. And then I'll pay him like 10 grand for the lot, and I'll pay all the rest of the money for the main house. And basically I'll get a lot for 10 grand, which is probably worth like 100 grand, Yep. Is that a good, I mean, that's what that's only if the seller is cool with doing it and delaying closing and all this stuff. Cause I've got money on the line on this house already, and we're supposed to close in a couple weeks. Am I thinking about it right?
I would say absolutely. And because you're Sam, you're like the king of creativity and making stuff happen. Somehow they're going to accept that and you're going to make it work. So I would say go for it.
That's awesome. All right, man. I want to hit one more thing before we wrap up here. And that is definitely the most common question I get when it comes to contractors. And that is, do you have any tips? And I even mean for rehab contractors, is there any tips you have for vetting contractors? Yes, maybe for new builds, but you and I had a conversation one time, and we were thinking about building some short-term rentals in Maggie Valley. And I was talking to some different contractors, and you were you made some comment about how contractors can there's so many ways for them to sneak in fees to their agreements. And I just remember that always stuck with me. I was like, I don't know how they do it, but they can make things look a certain way. They can inflate prices. And so there's definitely a reputation that contractors get for being a little shady. And I think it's just kind of part of the industry is what I've learned to accept with it. But what is your advice for someone who needs a good rehab contractor? They need a ground up developer. Let's say they don't go with your advice about the developer. They're like, I'm going to bootstrap it. I'm going to find me a GC. How, where, and how do you vet them? To make sure they're not going to just royally screw you over. Any thoughts you have on that would be super gold.
Absolutely. So I would just say that I don't know that all contractors are not shady, but a lot of contractors got into the industry that gave other really good contractors kind of a stigma. And I don't think it's fair to them, because there are so many great contractors out there that do honest work, that have so much integrity. So what I would say is the biggest thing you need to find on a builder is their integrity. You need to know that they're going to finish the project for you, and that they're not going to hide fees on you or mark it up. For an example of hiding fees would be if they say that it's going to be cost plus 20%, and you're like, okay, cool, it's cost plus 20. And then they start marking up their subcontractors and then marking. So say subcontractor quotes $10,000 for cabinets. Well, they're going to say, oh, these cabinets are $15,000 plus I'm going to add my 20% fee. It's the easiest way for them to do that. But if you know somebody and you trust them and you establish a relationship with them, that's the biggest thing. They're not going to do that to you. Or if they are, they're going to be completely honest with you and say, hey, like, listen, this could be a little bit more expensive. And I'm looking at this kind of price. It's just the relationship I have with the two builders I work with is I had many cups of coffee and many lunch meetings with them before I hired them. And then I also, once I had my plans, I got bids from multiple builders just to compare their price to somebody else's price. And then I would share the bids with each other. I would take off the names, but just say, hey, listen, this is what your competition is doing. And then they were like, most times the builders that I've created relationships with, they come in like so much cheaper. And it's all about relationships. If you can get the relationships with these guys, they will take care of you. And I was just listening to another podcast the other day, and they made a great point. They basically said, instead of managing subcontractors, you should be creating a relationship with a GC who already has those relationships with the subs, because they're those subs, that GC is the one that pays their bills. Those subs are going to put you as last priority if you're the one that's hiring those subcontractors, because you're not the one that's giving them a lot of business. You're just telling them that you need cabinets and floor and a wall removed or whatever. So hopefully that helped answer your question. But if you can vet people, create relationships. That's the biggest thing. Relationships are everything. So,
and as you get to know them, you'll get a sense for their integrity, is what I hear you saying. Like you'll get a sense for integrity in their character.
Yeah, their history of building, who they've worked with. The two builders I work with specifically only build for investors. They don't build for end users. So I found two really good ones that I trust. One of them I'm just now working with. I've not broken ground with them yet, but I have a really good feeling that she's going to take care of me. So I'm not concerned. And I've also limited the risk by writing in the contract the guaranteed maximum price. So, and just to give you context to that, I put this bid out for the triplex. I had 4 people bid on it. 2 of the ones I had relationships with came in between $450 and $475. The ones I did not have relationships with, somebody quoted me $850,000 to build the same exact thing.
Holy crap.
Yeah. That's how important relationships are. And that's how important, if you have a developer that has relationships with builders, you're going to save yourself so much money because they already have the relationships with these guys. They can build for way less.
Wow. Dude, let's end on that note, because that was a common theme you kind of preached, was like that through this whole episode was like the who, not how thing. And that's a big thing I'm taking away, is like, I'm going to reach out to this developer friend or, connect with you more on this, because I think that's in trying to figure it out is great. But if you can leverage someone else's ability, like, why not? So that's super cool, man. Gold. Thank you. Love you. Appreciate you. Awesome stuff. Thanks so much for sharing. And, just sharing your wisdom. This is going to help a lot of people. So thanks for being on, man.
Thanks for having me on, man. Love you too, brother. Hope you and Rachel are doing great.